Welcome to the Design Defect. Steve, what are we doing here this week?
Jamie, this week we're going to be looking at some groundbreaking 3D games.
So we're going to be looking at virtual reality, haptic rigs, headsets.
Actually, we're not talking about spending thousands of dollars here, but maybe with the exception of one or two of these. We're actually going back to the 90s and looking at some of the Super Nintendo library.
So you mean we're looking at the inception of polygonal environments?
Yeah, totally. We're ignoring Mode 7. Everyone's seen and played Mario Kart. And we're jumping straight into the Star Foxes and things like that you guys are familiar with.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at games that either use the Super FX, the Super FX2 chip, or don't use any at all. Hey, Steve, why don't you take us into the first game?
All right, you got it. Let's do it. Most of you are probably already familiar with the Super Nintendo Classic, so I'll just jump into a little bit of the development that went into the original Star Fox. Released on March 26, 1993, Star Fox was created by Nintendo working very closely with Argonaut Software. Get used to that name, by the way. What some people may not know about the original Super FX chip game is that the first prototype was actually developed on the original NES, codenamed NES Glider. Star Glider spawned from this prototype and then was ported to the Super Nintendo with less than impressive results. Programmer Jeremy Sand at Argonaut Software said they needed a custom chip to improve the 3D capabilities of the Super Nintendo. Thus, the Super FX chip was born, and apparently was so powerful that internally they joked that the Super Nintendo was just a box to hold the chip. Personally, I still think Star Fox is a great game today, and if you can adjust to the frame rate, the gameplay absolutely holds up. Star Fox 2 was once again developed in tandem by both Nintendo and Argonaut Software. This game was ambitious. Arguably more advanced than the better-known Star Fox 64, Star Fox 2 shattered the mold for what a Super Nintendo game was capable of. Full-on 3D dungeons with Zelda-style progression, gameplay above and below the surface of the ocean, the ability to roam around and completely explore a 3D environment. All of this wrapped up in a real-time tactics game running on your Super Nintendo would have been mind-blowing at the time. If you've already seen my impressions video of Star Fox 2, then you know I have no problem recommending the Super Nintendo Classic just for this game. Nintendo didn't want to compete with the 3D of the PlayStation and the Saturn at the time, and also wanted to push the 3D capabilities of the Nintendo 64, so they made the decision to cancel a fully completed game. I don't agree with the decision, but I think we can at least all be grateful that the game is finally available to consumers without the use of ROMs or modded cartridges, assuming of course you're able to get one this time. I say if you haven't played it but are curious, try your luck at getting a Super Nintendo Classic and play the retail version instead of one of the many ROMs out there that are either lacking features or may have some bugs.
Argonaut Software churned out the Super FX-powered Vortex in 1994, right smack in between developing one of the most influential flying games ever, Star Fox, and its unreleased sequel. So this begs the question, why did Vortex deserve to live while Star Fox 2 didn't? Compared to Star Fox, the world of Vortex feels barren and totally devoid of life and personality. The player pilots a mech called the Morphing Battle System against the Aikido forces. The mech morphs between 4 different modes, which actually play pretty well once you've had a chance to get used to rotating between the different forms and switching guns. In issue 63 of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Major Mike's Review Roundup scored the game with an average of 6 out of 10, and I quote, An interesting concept for fans of these simulator-type flight games. Being able to change into different vehicles is a good option, and the levels are very challenging. The pace may be slow, nevertheless, a unique game. So there we have it. Vortex's most alluring attribute is that it's a unique snowflake. I couldn't believe what my eyes saw and what my ears heard during the intro of Funcom Oslo's 1996 masterpiece, Winter Gold. This game took advantage of the Super FX2 chip to produce shockingly photorealistic cutscenes. While techno pumps in the background, you can watch the blurred shapes of live dancers wiggling or fallen skiers sliding down the slopes. Winter Gold provides arguably the best graphics of any game on the SNES. Lack of choppiness and quality graphics allow a player to compete against a typically difficult SNES AI. In fact, it even performs better than a sport game that came out almost 20 years ago. I'm looking at you, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Winter Gold allows competition in 3 cities where actual Winter Olympics took place: Albertville, France, Lillehammer, Norway, and Salt Lake City. While most of the 6 events are duds, downhill skiing is actually enjoyable and challenging. If I could pick 2 words to describe my emotional state while playing Winter Gold, I would choose amused and impressed.
Stunt Race FX, or Wild Tracks in Japan, is a cartoon-style racing game developed by, you guessed it, Nintendo and Argonaut Software. Released on October 10th, 1990 here in the States, Stunt Race FX received lukewarm reception at best. While some editorials couldn't get enough of it, others believe that the controls are a little too touchy and that the game just didn't provide a great enough sense of speed. Visually, it's definitely a step up from the original Star Fox in the polygon department, with complex racetracks that wrap around themselves, go inside of tunnels or underwater. It definitely felt like we were going to see great things out of the Super FX chip during the lifespan of the Super Nintendo. While that's certainly up for debate, Stunt Race FX is sort of a guilty pleasure of mine today. Yeah, the frame rate chugs and the controls are definitely a little touchy, but once you get past that, some of the courses are kind of fun, and there are a lot of details in here that are dripping in Nintendo charm, ranging from R-Wings flying in to crazy bonus stages. The sequel was planned for the Nintendo 64 called Buggy Boogie, but ultimately cancelled. Stunt Race FX may not be better than F-Zero, but I still wish this one had made the cut onto the Super Nintendo Classic. Like, come on, it's not like every game on the NES Classic was actually a classic, right?
So, Jamie, I noticed there weren't a whole lot of racing games in that first half.
Well, Steve, that's because I'm saving the best for last. I have 2 racing games for you. The first, which does not use a Super FX chip. The second, which does. And you're going to be able to tell a slight difference between the 2.
Okay, let's just do it. I'm so excited.
Okay, go. Hold onto your seats and try not to let THQ's Race Driving flip you into the floor with sheer gaming joy. Race Driving is the sequel to the insanely intense Hard Driving, which was the first arcade game to use 3D polygonal environments. Race Driving was released in August of 1990. 1,200 cabinets were produced at $9,000 a pop using an inflation calculator I found on a .gov website. That's about $16,752.54 per cabinet in today's dollars. Totally worth it. The machines featured force feedback steering and 3 pedals to stomp while you shifted gears, moments before flying off the track and exploding. The game was ported to the SNES about a year later without the benefit of the Super FX chip. The astoundingly low frame rate, along with its totally accurate and not garbage at all physics, make the game tedious to play at best. Right after the celebrity profile of Craig T. Nelson in the 43rd issue of Nintendo Power, George of George and Rob's Now Playing Fame stated, "I like the idea of Daredevil driving on jumps, loops, and bank turns, but the action in this game is so rough and slow that driving through these areas gives no sensation of danger or realism." George, you nailed it. If you want a more thrilling experience, read the article about Coach.
Dirt Tracks FX is my other guilty pleasure on the Super Nintendo. Once again using the original Super FX chip, this motocross game was released in North America in June of 1995 and developed by Sculptured Software. It features 2-player simultaneous play and it has some intricate and creative track design spreading across 22 courses. Dirt Tracks FX resembles motocross only because the sprites themselves look like a person riding a dirt bike, but beyond that, this game feels more like the original Off-Road, where the physics are maybe a bit more variable and less predictable, until you've mastered the way the game handles anyway. The controls are once again a bit touchy, though that's really only an issue at higher speeds. There's definitely a fun rhythm that's required to master each track here, which is sort of the essence of motocross, I suppose, but I think it's less about getting crazy air and more about learning the best angle to enter into each turn. There are never any crashes in the game, but you can drive out of bounds if you get careless. Overall, this is a game I return to about once or twice a year. I can understand why it probably fell off everyone's radar back in the 90s though, assuming it was ever there to begin with.
Now, if you need realism in a racer, you should really check out Dirt Racer. Released in May of 1995, this European exclusive proudly featured the Super FX chip, as the announcement took up a quarter of the box art. Dirt Racer features physics vastly superior to race driving. Just check out these clips as I bounce around the track and explode for the sheer delight of it. The Super FX chip does provide the extra muscle necessary to improve the graphics and frame rate, and by extension, the gameplay. Alas, Issue 29 of Game Master knocked Dirt Racer to the ground in May of 95 with a review score of 21 out of 100. Les, the reviewer, had this to say: "At least we know why this was delayed. They were trying to make it half decent. They failed. Mission Impossible, guys. Dirt Racer is the worst racing game I've ever seen." Well, Les, you must have never played race driving.
Some of you may be wondering why Jurassic Park is on this list. While most of the game took place from an overhead perspective, there was still a good chunk that was experienced in first person. Released in November of 1993, Jurassic Park on the Super Nintendo interestingly didn't utilize the Super FX chip to pull off its impressive first-person environments. It was just using good old-fashioned integrated Mode 7, but also incorporated texture mapping, which was a lot for the Super Nintendo to handle. The frame rate didn't drop jaws, but the complete audio-visual package of Jurassic Park was strong enough to earn it high marks back in the day. While no music from the movie was used, it still supported a killer soundtrack and was the first Super Nintendo game mastered in Dolby Pro Logic. A Apparently, Jurassic Park had a troubled development and disappointed the press during its first unveiling in June of 1993. The graphics at that time were so poor that may have been all they could focus on. Obviously, developer Ocean Software turned that around and delivered in the end, but I honestly can't help but wonder what the game would have been like if they did use a Super FX chip. Jurassic Park can be beaten quickly, and while I think I prefer this one to the Genesis version of the game, I personally don't think either one have great controls, which is a real downer for any action game.
I killed Hitler in id Software's Wolfenstein 3D on my 46 when it came out in '92. Sadly, I was forced to kill Stoppmeister, the non-mustachioed Hitler doppelganger, on my SNES in '94 after censors had their way with poor, gentle Wolfenstein 3D. For an SNES game that ran on a stock cartridge and does not benefit from the Super FX chip, it plays surprisingly well. The censors ran wild though in this port, turning dogs into mutated rats, along with a number of stylistic changes that muddied the animations and gameplay to turn the Nazi Slaughterfest into a kid-friendly Master State Slaughterfest. The port did provide some welcome changes though that would eventually be used well into the then distant future. Players no longer found themselves lost in the labyrinth of Castle Wolfenstein, as they now had an overhead map. A flamethrower and rocket launcher were also added. This game was also compatible with the SNES mouse. In spite of the numerous changes this game underwent while being ported from MS-DOS to the SNES, it remains responsive, and the D-pad functions more than adequately.
Stop! Stop!
All right, Jamie, what did you learn today?
I learned that Super Nintendo 3D polygonal games suck.
All of them suck?
That is a sweeping generalization against all of them, yes.
Okay, I think you're still just bitter that I gave you Race Driving to review.
You gave me all the games that were never even published in the United States.
You could have asked for some. You could have asked for Doom or something else if you wanted.
It's because I didn't know any better, so my judgment stands. All Super Nintendo 3D environment games suck. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Have a good one.